Start doing any work, you should really acknowledge why you want to do that. And growing seeds is becoming less and less common, so fewer and fewer people are really asking themselves, why should I grow seeds? But there's still a lot of good reasons. And the first one is just fun. So I like to say that inspiration begins with plants. And so that means that the plants are really what's responsible for collecting all of the energy from the sun, acknowledging the moon cycle, acknowledging all the stars in the sky, and relating that in their physical form. And so they make energy that we eat. Everything on Earth needs plants. We need the oxygen they make. We need the sugars that they make. Everything under the ground needs plants for those same reasons. And so plants, being the original source of inspiration, just that alone should be enough for cultivating our interest in them, and especially cultivating some of their products, being the seeds. So I really think that acknowledging the importance of plants in our lives from a very basic level is very important for our basic appreciation for our own lives and our own place on this planet. We definitely need to recognize that the long relationship between people and plants is all related to seed saving and cultivation. So plants look the way they do today because they evolved with people and they evolved with other animals. So it's not like plants aren't independent from us. We are directly related to their cycles. And so participating in those cycles is really, really important for the progress of ecosystems and evolution in general, or spirituality in general. And I think speaking of spirituality, there's a couple important kind of points. There's a lot of stuff in the Bible related to seeds and growing seeds, and a classic story is obviously the Adam and Eve story, where just the temptation, that fun temptation of the apple or whatever it was, once Adam took a bite out of that, he was cast from the Garden of Eden and then sent on his own to cultivate his own plants. No longer, after he tried the fruit of that apple, was he able to just live on exactly what was given to him by blessing of God. He had to then participate in that system and take some ownership of it, and it wasn't easy. But they also say that the first plant that was ever cultivated was the fig, and that is kind of symbolized by the fig leaf that Adam and Eve wore. And so figs also grow from seeds. They can be propagated in a variety of ways, but consider the old importance of growing from seed. And so, like I say, plants need people, and people need plants too. And we can start even further back than Adam and Eve. We can go to Genesis in the Bible and say that God commands earth to bring forth herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind, and God saw that it was good. And so what that means is all the plants and all the people, all the living things, are built with the capacity to reproduce and produce offspring that is true to its kind, that is going to look like what its parents looked like. And so all the capacity for regeneration is already built into plants. And so our ability to interpret and understand that ability is what makes us good gardeners. And I argue strongly that when, as gardeners or scientists, we kind of move away from this innate ability of plants to reproduce on their own, we kind of leave this path that God said was good. And so I am a critic of genetic engineered foods, and we can get into that. I'd like to get into it at the end here, but when a plant loses its ability to reproduce, to make an offspring like itself, it leaves this time-honored natural system that is evident in nature and evident and explained in the Bible and other philosophies as well. So anyway, we grow plants for fun. You can take a dandelion and see it in seed and pick it up, and it's this beautiful globe of white seeds. And what do you want to do with that seed? You want to imagine you're a child and blow on it and watch the seeds go everywhere, and it's fun. It's very, very playful. It's kind of it's just it's a very base emotion. So they appeal to our base emotions of fun. Not to mention they all look different. All the seeds really are very different from each other. So just getting to see those seeds is something that piques curiosity. And we know from a lot of our favorite foods that they can be very good to eat as well. So a lot of the seeds we like, even cilantro we like as a leaf, but that'll become coriander when it starts making seed. Delicious seed to eat. Fennel, dill and fennel look kind of alike, but you can eat the leaves too, but when they make seed, the characteristics change a little bit and also become very good for seed. A really important one for us around here, hazelnuts, has become a big industry, especially in Oregon, but all the nut trees are a great form of seeds that we all really appreciate just as a food source. Real quick, they say of all the American foods grown in the United States in history, if you made a big pile of all the foods ever grown in the United States, what pile of food would be the biggest? Would it be corn? Would it be rice? What food crop would make the biggest pile if you looked at all the food ever grown in the United States? Anybody have a guess?
Wheat.
Sugar beets, wheat, alfalfa, soy. They say it's acorns.
Acorns. Really?
Acorns, and we don't really eat them that much these days, really because they require a little bit of processing, but the native people, especially in California, relied really heavily on acorns. And so basically they'd bury them in the mud and they would release a lot of those tannins over the course of the winter, and then they'd have a stored food crop that they could harvest from and make all kinds of foodstuffs out of, really nutritionally rich. So, also, we should consider that there are so many different things that we can eat. There's at least 20,000 different described edible plants. So that's more than I can that's way more than I can name. I'd be hard pressed to name 100 probably. And that's a lot. They say there are only, I'm not going to try to name them, but they say there are only 10 food crops that make up 50% of the world's bulk energy. And so of 20,000 food crops, that's not very many. There's only about 100 food crops that have even been studied at an advanced agronomic level. So meaning that we've done research with them in universities and explored whether we can cultivate them for commercial value, basically. So the plant world is very big and largely very unexplored. And so it seems like it's already big, but when you start considering how many things are yet to be done, that's where we all become important as gardeners, because we all have different interests. We're all attracted to different plants, different characteristics. And if we all are curious in seed saving, we're going to cultivate those specific characteristics or specific varieties or whatever that we think are important. So cultivating plants for food and for happiness in that regard kind of go together. So the concept of all societies, of all civilizations, have been plants for money. As soon as societies grow to a point where they have resources that support wealth, we start developing currency systems, and generally speaking, that all starts with a seed-based currency system. The price of a bushel of wheat becomes an important barometer for our global economy. Previously, in places like Cambodia, where they built the great Angkor Wat temples and had a huge society there, that was all a rice-based currency. I believe the same is true in Japan and China. You could definitely use those foods with a weighed value to exchange for money. You can't really take seeds to the grocery store these days and expect to be able to trade it for a gallon of milk, but for most of history, you probably could take some seed to your local farmer in exchange for something, because there was a open source seed commons. There was no such thing as plant patents. There was no such thing as hybrid varieties that couldn't be reproduced by seed. everybody that was a gardener or everybody that was a farmer basically collected some of their own seed and used that for barter purposes, or just even used it for bragging rights to show that their seed was superior at the state fair or whatever. So basically then in the 30s, people started developing hybrid seeds based off of research done by the father of modern genetics, Mendel. Mendel. He developed the concept of the F1 hybrid, or filial 1 hybrid, which is basically where you have two different parents of stable strains. When you breed two different parents, like if you have a pea variety that grows tall and a pea variety that grows short that makes purple flowers, and you breed them together, they're going to make a stable cross. They're not going to be halfway in between all those things. They're going to take some traits that are dominant and not express some traits that are resistant, or recessive, and they're going to be a stable strain. So F1 hybrids are a stable strain with predictable characteristics. And so when we discovered how to commercialize that in the 30s, hybrids became the standard mode of operation for our farmers and a lot of gardeners as well, because they had these characteristics generally that were well suited for commercial production, whether it's be ease of harvest, volume of harvest, timing of harvest, whatever. There's lots of reasons for developing hybrids. And so that really commercialized the seed market. And so when you create a hybrid seed, an F1 or filial hybrid, if you breed that seed to itself, it will produce offspring, but the offspring won't be consistent. They'll be what's called F2 hybrids. And so they will exhibit more random characteristics related to those two original parents. So it's F2 hybrids aren't really suitable for commercial production because they have too much variability in the offspring. So if you're growing plants that are hybrids, F1 hybrids, consider that you're not going to be able to collect seed from that that's going to produce what's called true to type seed. So you will have a random mix of seed. And that might be really fun. If you're a seed breeder, you'll have all these characteristics that weren't expressed by the F1 hybrid that then you can again select for and do more breeding. But it's hard if you're just a commercial gardener or commercial farmer that's trying to make money. So moving along in history, what happened in 1980 is plant patents became allowed by the Supreme Court. So basically the genetic material of a seed could then be patented. So not only could you make a hybrid that was difficult to reproduce on your own, but then you could make a hybrid that was even illegal to reproduce. So today there are various types of plant patents that exist, and I'll go over some of them hopefully towards the end of the talk when we get down to the part on politics. But anyway, so that's kind of the why, for food and for fun and for money, and all of those things can go together. That's kind of how I try to balance my life with those three things. Food always gets way bigger than all the other categories for me. But anyway, talk a little bit about practical application for us, and I hope that you'll all ask questions and stuff as we're going through on this stuff, because it's important to me that you're here and that you get acknowledged. But how do we get seeds, especially if we're not collecting them ourselves from our own plants? Well, you can trade them. We just talked about it's the original thing to trade. And so going to seed libraries, that's kind of a new thing. I don't know of any local seed libraries, but maybe you could.
Port Orchard Library has
Port
a
Orchard.
library.
Okay, so Port Orchard Library has a seed library. And I believe that, I don't know if there's a fee for that. I think different ones have different free things, but you can take and bring seeds. It's like a seed exchange, no? More or less, borderline?
Just take them.
Just
You're
take
supposed to report back what happens.
Okay.
And then bring back whatever you
That's great.
So this is kind of a newer, I'm going to say it's kind of a newer thing that's starting to pop up, and there are various resources to support these things. One is an international resource that you can find information about, the Community Seed Network, and they have a website, the communityseednetwork.org, has resources for making a seed library or even coming up with curriculum to teach children about seed saving. But the cool thing is if you have like a garden club, a lot of garden clubs have seed saving or seed exchanges. And so just learning about what your friends are doing is going to pique your interest in what they have, and you know, the opportunity to exchange that material is really, really cool. And if you can form groups around that, what you get is kind of a restoration of that concept of a seed commons. So it's a neat way to get to know your neighbors and to, you know, find out what's growing. And if you are sourcing from locals, there's a good chance, if they're good seed growers, that you're going to have seed that's well suited to your area. So if I'm buying seed that's grown, if I'm buying seed out of any seed catalog and it's grown in New Jersey or grown in West Virginia or grown in California, it might be fine and perform fine here. But if I buy something that is grown locally, it's probably going to be more well suited to our local environment. If it's shown already that it can thrive locally, it's a pretty good chance it's going to work for me in my garden too. So locally sourced seed can be an advantage, but I'm going to say it's not always the case. We've been discouraged academically for a lot of years, really since the 30s, since hybridation of seeds. We've been discouraged culturally to save seeds. So even when I was in college at Washington State University, it was explained to us that if I tried to save my own seed, I would inherently have seed that was infected with virus, or that had depressed vigor, or that was inferior in some way to hybrid seed, and that I would be better off just buying seed as a grower. And I can recognize why, because if you are learning how to do something, there's obviously going to be bumps in the road. You know, I never learned how to save seed from my mom, and she didn't really learn how to do that from her grandmother. So there's been a disconnect in our cultural knowledge, generally speaking, of these practices. But quite frankly, with modern technology, we've got refrigerators in our homes now. We've got all the tools for seed saving in most of our kitchens, as far as screens and jars and things like that. It's really pretty approachable, and with a little bit of practice, you can start getting good at it. And it can take a few years maybe of practice, but what they say is anything worth doing well is worth doing wrong first. So it's worth trying out, and you can learn from it. So don't just distrust seed because it's from your neighbor and you've been told that local seed is not as good. But do consider that hobby seed, people who are hobbyists collecting seed, might be collecting seed that has been crossed and will not be true to type. They might have seed that is contaminated with some kind of virus, or even contaminated with some kind of weevil or something like that that's going to be eating the seed. So most of the commercial seed has been graded in some way and tested for disease. But even when you order seeds out of a catalog, you're not really going to ever be 100% sure that your seed is going to be true to type. Even if you're getting a hybrid, it's easy to mix up seeds. So anyway, moving along to seed catalogs. It's really easy to get excited about the gardening season this time of year because we feel pretty cooped up. And we get these seed catalogs with all these beautiful pictures of everything that's going on in the garden. We just are so excited for watermelon, but we're never going to get a watermelon like that here. You know, no matter how happy that baby is, we're never going to get a watermelon like that in Western Washington. We've got a lot of sophisticated technology input, so we need to kind of take what we see in the seed catalogs with a grain of salt and recognize that not all seed catalogs are going to present the information exactly the same, and they're all going to have a bunch of jargon. And generally when you buy a packet of seeds, you're making a commitment to a lot more plant material than you're going to get if you're just buying little starts like that we sell here. So when I order my carrot seed, I might be getting 10,000 seeds in a half an ounce or something like that. And that's a lot of seed. And so it might be way more than I bargained for as a gardener. So the easiest thing to do when you're ordering seeds is to let your eyes get bigger than your garden, and you order way more seed than your garden can handle. And so that's not always a problem. You know, there's a lot of ways to deal with extra seed, whether it's giving it to friends, selling it at a little stand in front of your house as little starts, or even